What's up, everybody? Welcome to Fresh Off the Set. I'm David Osmond.
And I'm Kari Hawker Diaz. You know, I love when we get to do these podcasts because we get guests. I mean, there are all sorts of subjects that we get to go over, and I really connected with this one. So I got to interview Beatty Carmichael. He is an author. He helps people with basically addiction breakthroughs. He's an expert and author of The Prayer of Freedom, like I said, and he's just phenomenal. And he helps us reach that peace. Like, I think we're all just aiming for just a little peace in our life, right?
I'm anxious to hear this for sure. I mean, we all have so much, sometimes chaos going on around us. He's got this new book called Outrageous Peace. It's a great title. I'm trying to figure out what his message is in this. It sounds like he's done this before. And great tips and advice on how we can find that calm and that area of peace when sometimes everything seems out of control.
Yeah, you know, he speaks about his approach to calming our anxious thoughts that we all have and transforming our life through that power of peace. And what I love about it's like he doesn't give us these like lengthy directions and things, you know, they're like small, effective life changes that we can all do.
Got it. Well, it's a message I think we can all relate to, and as we identify it and we also show that vulnerable side we all have, I think we have more in common, every one of us, than we even realize. So his message is a universal one, it sounds like.
Yep, and just how to strive and create peace in our own life, and that looks differently for all of us, but he helps us achieve that. So should we just give it a listen?
Let's get to it.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Beatty Carmichael, I am so excited to be chatting with you today. Thank you for sitting down with me.
Well, thank you, Kari. I'm very excited about being here.
We appreciate you. Okay, you know, we're talking about what actually restores peace and why, you know, we try harder, it doesn't work. But first, tell us a little bit about who you are.
Yeah, real simply, I actually come from a line of 7 generations of medical doctors. And then I was married into another generations of medical doctors as well. But I went into business, and then about 10 years ago, just had this deep urge in my heart to help people get unstuck of things that they've been stuck with: anxiety, depression, chronic pain, addictions, things of that sort. And started to learn from my father-in-law, who had helped a lot of people in that area. And I started to do a lot of testing and experimenting with things. And over the last 10 years, working on about a 90% success rate in helping people release those things in their lives that are causing these issues and going back into a life of peace. So that's a short overview about me.
Well, we're thankful for you. Sounds like you've helped a lot of people, and you've worked with people, speaking of that, dealing with all the things you talked about, stress, anxiety for years. What led you to challenge that idea that we need to, you know, just try harder to feel better?
Because nothing was working. My premise comes from that things don't have to be that difficult. And what my father-in-law always taught me, he was a 50 or 60 year practicing internal medicine doctor. Years back, he died 25 years ago. So before everything moved to pharmaceuticals will solve everything, he would tell his patients that healthcare is based on mental, physical, and spiritual. And you'd come to him with a problem. He would analyze those 3 areas in your life and had a tremendous success rate. The spiritual not being religious, but just another dimension of us.
Mm-hmm.
And I started to realize that healing was possible, recovery was possible, and I'm always the one that wants to do a proof of concept, test things, and push the envelope from what is the norm. And I think that's kind of what got me here.
Well, we need that. We need people like you that push the norm and challenge things and question things, right?
Yeah, exactly. Someone has to be radical as long as it's not too radical.
Yes. Okay, when we talk about peace, baby, what are we actually meaning when we say peace?
So peace is when nothing in your life disrupts you. In other words, if you think about, I think of our life as a 3-legged stool. The 3 legs are mental, physical, and spiritual, just like my father-in-law taught me. And when all 3 legs of that stool are steady, that stool is rock solid. So you can have anything coming against you in your life, chaos, problems, people attacking, but internally, you're solid, you're peaceful. Probably the best way to describe it, years back, we were taking a family vacation. We were in the minivan driving through Montana in this horrible rainstorm. It was so loud, it sounded like hammers hitting the roof and the windshield. And so the chaos in the world around us was horrible. It was drenching wet. Inside, we were perfect temperature, totally dry, everything calm. That's what peace is like. It doesn't matter what the outside is. Inside, you're totally at calm.
And that feels so good when you have that peace, when you find that peace. It is like the goal, right? And how should people recognize peace if we're looking at it in our own lives?
I think you'll recognize it when there's nothing bugging you. Like there's a neighbor in my neighborhood, and when she walks like she's very stiff and upset and always angry. She drives like a little bat out of hell, just all through the neighborhood. And on the back of her bumper sticker, she has this thing that says, I run to get the crazies out. So she realizes there's something in her life, this undercurrent of irritability that just drives her crazy. Most people know it. Best way to describe how to know if you don't have that peace, it would be one of three questions I like to ask. Do you feel like you're carrying an overweight backpack through life and it keeps getting heavier? Or do you have darkness in your life? Or do you have anything chronic or persistent that just bugs you all the time? And if you answer yes to any of those three questions, then in most cases, there's a lack of what I call peace that you can restore and get rid of.
Those are good examples. Those are really good visuals. Thank you. And, a lot of people feel like they're doing everything right and they're still feeling that anxiety. Why does peace slip away even when we're putting in like 150%, so much effort?
Most people don't realize that peace doesn't come from the outside. It comes from the inside. See, our outside life is mental and physical, but the inside part is that spiritual. Not religious, but another component. Like think about our conscience. It guides us into right and wrong. When we do something wrong, we feel guilty. And we try to force, like this lady in the neighborhood, she thinks getting rid of the crazies is outside effort. So she's always exercising, super fit, but she can't get through to the inside. Like in my yard, I have a beautiful green yard, but if I have weeds coming up, I can try external effort, running over it with a lawnmower, and now you can't see the weeds in my yard. But in a couple of days, they crop right back up because the problem isn't on the surface. The problem is underneath the surface. And until you get the roots out of the way, then the problem keeps coming back no matter how much effort you put into it. So we can try to do all the right things that we've been told to do, but most of those things only depress and suppress the issue, but they don't eliminate the issue. What I'm finding is if you learn to let go, I call it being misaligned on that spiritual side. When you let go of that misalignment and get back in alignment, then those issues that have been bothering you literally disappear. Like just a couple of months ago, this guy came up, he was an acquaintance, and he said, I've been dealing with heavy anxiety and it's just tearing me up. And he said, I went to the doctor and the doctor said, oh, you're going to have this the rest of your life, so let's get you on meds. And I said, well, anxiety is easy to get rid of. I said, how long have you had it? He said, about 1.5 years ago. And I guided him through what I call the outrageous peace process, which is allowing his inner self, his conscience, to identify what got out of alignment. And it turned out that what came up was his wife had a breast exam. They found lumps, and he became terribly afraid. So I guided him just to release that fear. By the end of the day, his anxiety was completely gone, never returned. So it's simple things like that we think it's working harder, but actually takes no effort. It's just understanding how to get down to the core of the problem.
You talk about that internal misalignment. What does that mean maybe in simpler terms for people?
So think back on that three-legged stool. As long as every leg is perfectly aligned and solid, then that stool is solid in your life. Doesn't matter what happens, it's holding. But take that third leg, that spiritual leg, and now pull it out of alignment. Gets a little bit wonky. Mm-hmm. When it starts to get out of alignment, it's putting stress on the other two legs. And over time, that stress creates problems. It's not immediate. It thins. Like I have my glass of water. It weighs maybe 1 pound. I can hold it easily. But if I have to hold it for an hour, my arm gets tired. Mm-hmm. For a day, it starts to ache. And 2 days, not a chance. So simply by taking something little, like just a little bit of fear, a little bit of unforgiveness, and holding on to it, that's a misalignment. And over time, it creates a lot of stress in those other two legs. And I see it manifesting a lot of times in anxiety, depression, chronic pain like arthritis and migraines, allergies and asthma, all kinds of things that you get rid of the root. And I'm seeing all these type of things disappear at a very high success rate.
Oh, that three-legged chair is such a good visual, because you see you're missing just one leg. The other two are just going to really have to pick up the work. And over time, it's going to wear on it, when they're supplementing for it. And that's a really good visual for everyone to think about.
And that goes back to why you said, why if you work 150% to get rid of it, you can work on those two legs, but if the problem is that third one, then you're working in the wrong direction.
Beatty, how can someone tell the difference between like everyday stress, for parents, or we're, working and just those everyday stressors and something deeper that's maybe out of alignment?
If it's persistent, this is what I'm finding. If it's constantly persistent, it's usually tied to this misalignment in that third leg. Putting alignment back in by releasing will solve the problem.
What about like routines, habit, or mindset work? Why do effort-based approaches like eventually stop working?
So think about it's the difference between calm and peace, Kari. Calm is when I shut the doors, turn off my phone, I turn down the lights and turn on some soothing music, and I can just sit back and calm myself. But it's an external calm. As soon as I stop the external effort, it all comes back with a rush. Peace is internal, and it takes no effort. Peace is simply, let me give you an example. A lady named Susan comes up to me, and she's been dealing with rheumatoid arthritis for 15 or 20 years. And she said, "Can you help me?" I said, "I think I can." And I asked her a couple of questions, and then I led her through this outrageous peace approach, just giving her conscience permission to say, am I holding on to something that I shouldn't hold on to? And what came up to the surface was she had unforgiveness toward her sister. I said, well, what happened? She said, about 20 years ago, my sister did something against my mother, and I've never forgiven her. I said, would you be willing to forgive your sister? Now watch this. Now that it possibly had something to do with her pain, she said, yes, I'll forgive her quickly.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I led her into simply saying, you speak it out loud because out loud makes it real. She just said, I forgive and release my sister for what she did to my mother. By the end of the day, her arthritis pain had completely ceased. She caught up with me 4 weeks later. I was teaching there at the Addiction Recovery Center. And she said, Beatty, I want to tell you what happened. I said, okay. She said, ever since you helped me with that, I've had no arthritis pain. I went back to the doctor last week. He was so surprised. He retested me for arthritis. He said, I have no arthritis in my body. It was simply a misalignment that when she got it back in alignment, the arthritis faded away. That's peace.
Incredible, Beatty. I mean, you just think of how much our bodies hold on to that we're not realizing, that our minds are going through. And when we let some things go, how we physically feel better.
Yeah. Another lady she had sciatica pain from her neck all the way down to her toe and pain across her back and leading her through the same process. By the next morning, it was gone as well. And she'd been dealing with it for like 20 some odd years. It was, I see this happen. And here's what's really interesting, Kari. So I teach at a women's addiction recovery center. There's about 500 women there. My class is the favorite because as I teach them through the deeper form of outrageous peace and measuring it statistically, I'm finding about 87% of those women are getting rid of all of their addiction urges for pornography, sex, addiction, and alcohol, drugs and alcohol. Their mental issues, anxiety, depression, bipolar disorder are going away. Their chronic pain, their persistent sicknesses. And I'm not saying it's 100% successful, but for most people, I'm finding that third leg really holds the key. And if we go back to our medical community, In my father-in-law's time, which was the mid-1900s through the end, there was this understanding there was a spiritual component to our health. Today, we've removed the spiritual component. It's now as mental or physical with a big dependence on pharmaceuticals. But yet, they may mask the problem, they may suppress it, but it's like those weeds in my grass in my yard. I can cut over it, but until I get rid of the root, they'll keep coming back up.
Yeah. Yeah, those roots are still going to be there. Is there a point, Beatty, where self-improvement can actually make things worse?
I don't think so, unless the self-improvement is, a lot of times we deny the problem. I don't have a problem, or like the neighbor, I can just push myself through it and get rid of it. But if you think about self-improvement, usually has to do with something from the outside. And if the thing that you're dealing with is on the inside, then outside stuff doesn't affect it. That's why working harder won't solve it. Not working from the outside isn't going to worsen it either, because you're dealing with it. It's a different dimension of our being.
Sure. What are some signs that you see that someone is stuck in that cycle of like doing too much effort?
Gosh, so too much effort is very simple. You still think that working harder is going to solve this problem. So you rearrange your life to try to work harder to control this. And you may be able to control it a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you'll never get it out because it's not about effort. So if you keep working at it, and it's not working, then maybe it's that third leg. And I'm not saying everything's the third leg. So there are some things that's a mental thing that you need to, think more positively and you'll fix it because it's not the third leg. But if the things that you're trying to do simply do very little to get rid of that thing you're trying to get rid of, then in almost all cases, I find it is now in the third leg. And this is where, my grandfather, my father-in-law, used to practice diagnosis by testing, right? I think it's this, so let's test this solution. And if it works, then my diagnosis was right. So if you're testing something and it's not working, then your diagnosis was wrong. It's not something outside that you have to work on. So let's change the diagnosis and let's try outrageous peace process and see if it's something on the inside. If it disappears, then you know that it was actually an internal thing and not external.
Sure, internal. Okay, and you outline a 3-step path to releasing pressure. Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, real simply, the concept is easy. The process takes a little bit more dexterity, but it's name it, locate it, release it, okay? Naming it first is acknowledging, like let's just use this lady in the neighborhood. I'm always irritable. I've got these crazies in me. My mind is constantly running, okay? Then locate it. There's a process, and this is what Chapter 8 of my Outrageous Peace book does. It's a non-religious meditative prayer that gives your inner self, your conscience, permission and a safe place to actually start looking for that thing that at one point it said, let it go, don't worry about it. And you go, no, you know what that person did to me? That was wrong. I'm upset and I'm right. I'm righteous to be upset in her case, let's say. So now you've squashed back on that conscience, and so it won't let you know that you still need to let go of it. You've forgotten about it. Mm-hmm. So we have to give our conscience the safe space to say it's okay to search for it and surface it. So now it works to surface it and locate it. So that's number 2, is locating it, which is your conscience does it, not you. And then the third step is to release it. Releasing it is to simply verbalize, like in this lady's case, just projecting out what it may have been. She would say something like, I release that person from all the anger that I've been holding against them. I release my anger and I'll no longer be controlled by it anymore. So that's name it, locate it, release it. But the key part is it's no effort. Have you ever had, Kari, some issue in your life, you're trying to work through it, you can't figure it out, so you just kind of mentally put it aside. Then a week or so later, you're taking a shower and all of a sudden the answer comes fully developed. Boom, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
What's happened is you gave your subconscious permission to figure out the problem for you. It took you no effort. The outrageous peace process is the same thing. It's giving your conscience that permission to find the problem for you and surface it. There's no effort. It's not about working harder. It's simply about knowing how to unlock the key so you can release it.
And Beatty, why do you think verbalizing it, like you said at the end, we say it out loud, we release it. Why do you think that's so important?
Well, have you ever, you've been thinking through a problem, and usually once you start to talk it through, either by yourself or with someone else, the answer comes clear. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So talking it out loud, it sort of like reinforces it. There's power in your words, right? You can think something, but it's just a fleeting thought. But once you verbalize it, then it becomes kind of real and solid. And that's what I've been doing. Maybe thinking it will work as well, but I just find that verbalizing it just kind of makes it official. I release it and I renounce that.
Absolutely. And how is this approach different from traditional stress management techniques?
I think most traditional stress management techniques, it's all based on the discipline of controlling your circumstances and your environment. It's the calm on the outside, like, hey, just stay away from that person. They constantly create issues. Before you go to that person, just kind of, toughen up, be willing to handle anything. And then just, it's all about how you manage by discipline, but it has nothing to do with actually going to the root of the issue. And the root of the issue is that misalignment usually. And if you just get that alignment back in, releasing what's holding it back, then peace automatically restores. Because it's not that you're pushing peace into your life, is you're blocking what's keeping peace from naturally being there. You're removing the blockage, and that's a totally different approach.
For someone listening right now who's feeling really overwhelmed, what is one small shift they can do to help?
The biggest shift is to think back of, when did something begin? How long have I had it? And is there something there that I'd simply need to let go? A lot of times people can figure this out on their own. Like if my friend who had the anxiety understood the simple shift, he could have thought back and said, I've had this about 1.5 years ago. What happened back then? But a lot of times we don't know how to think through it. We don't know where to look for it or even how that works. But if you can just understand that one concept and then go back and be able to release whatever it was, then that's all you really need to know. And that's why Outrageous Peace, my book, it's like a 30-minute read to get to chapter 8, because it's very simple. It's just now taking these 10 years that I've worked through and the process to release, to give your conscience that simple instructions to identify it for you. That was the hardest part for me. The process is easy. Figuring out the process was the hard part.
And you say the right words matter. Why are words, and we talked a little bit about verbalizing, why are words such a powerful part of releasing that internal pressure?
In a very simple, humorous analogy, I can look at my wife and I can tell her she's beautiful 2 ways. Honey, every time I look at you, all time stands still. Or I could say, honey, your face could stop a clock, right? Words matter. Mm-hmm. And the most important part of the words is they mean something, and also the inference in what they mean. So being able to have the right words to give your conscience the freedom to identify it, and the right words on how to release. Some things is I release, like I release my sister from what she did. Other things, it's renounce. I renounce what that person said to me and what it's done in me believing what they said. Sometimes it's breaking, believe it or not. Like with all tied into all this, if you've ever had a relationship in the past that was abusive or controlling, that relationship is no longer there. You still sometimes feel like you're still being controlled by that person because there's still something in that third part of your life, that spiritual leg. And there it may be like breaking or removing some sort of a spiritual misalignment that was tied to that person. So having the right words to tell your conscience what it's supposed to do, that's the real key.
Why do you think your message feels so different from what we usually hear in the self-help space?
I don't want to sound cocky on this or too brash, but because it works. I mean, a nearly 90% success rate. This guy, a friend of mine named Bob, he comes up to me He had just been served divorce papers. Their marriage has been on the rocks for years, and he is distraught. So I led him through this outrageous peace process and just guiding him into surfacing things and releasing them. And I said, how do you feel after going through this? He said, I feel like 1,000 pounds of bricks have been lifted off of me. Mm. And he said, my life has been dark, and now I feel like it's full of light. And I started to share that as he continued to go through that process, that he will get to the point where nothing in his life will ever disturb him, that he'll be pinching himself saying, oh, life is so blessed. And he looked at me with his deep, longing eyes and said, are you serious? Can life really be like that? I said, yeah, Bob, we've been living it that way for years. And then a year later, I see him again at a party. He comes up, gives me this great big bear hug. And almost with tears in his eyes, he said, thank you, thank you, thank you. And what happened is the divorce went through. She took every single dime, all of his inheritance from his grandfather, everything out of his accounts, took the house, took the kids. He's living at his mom's house, and she's poisoning the kids against him. So everything in his life should be like really heavy and depressed. But inside, he is so solid. He lost about 30 pounds because now he doesn't have the stress. And when you say, what's different with my message? This message works. That's the only thing I can say. If you're trying something and it works for you and it gets rid of it, keep it up. I mean, you don't have to keep it up if it got rid of it, right? Yeah. You don't have to keep it up if it keeps coming back. But once you learn what the real source of a lot of this is and you let it go, then it works, and the proof is in the pudding.
Well, we like when it works.
Yes.
That's the key, and having peace be the ultimate goal. I mean, it just feels so nice, and when we can reach that in our lives and to be able to get to that point with maybe some minimal work is all worth it.
I find that if you, I keep thinking about 1800s, they needed to get light in the room. So they go make candles, and light a candle is very dim. So now think about, I bring some from 1800s here, and it's nighttime outside. So we need to get some more light in here. Yeah, just hit the switch on the wall. No, we need to get candles. No, just hit the switch. And he finally hits the switch, and the whole room lights up bright as daylight. And he goes, oh my gosh, that was so easy. It really is easy once you understand there's a secret behind it. If you don't know the secret, it's really, really hard.
Yeah. Well, thank you for all these tips and tricks. And I wish we had more time to talk because I want to ask you so many more questions. But, people can, dive deeper if they would like. Where can they learn more about, your full method?
Yeah. So the full method, best place to go is my website, outrageouspeace.com. Got some information there. You can get the book. I recommend going there rather than the bookstore directly because there are a lot of books on peace and things like that. So we have a direct link to Amazon and other booksellers that make sure you get their correct book. But outrageouspeace.com if you want to learn more, if you want to start to apply it in your life.
Okay. And I'm sure many do from hearing this. Thank you, Beatty Carmichael, for joining me today. Really appreciate all your insight and your knowledge. It's a wealth of knowledge. We appreciate you.
Well, thank you, Kari. I very much appreciate being here.
Thank you. And thank you for listening to another episode of Fresh Off the Set. Please rate, review, and subscribe. And we will see you next week. Congrats, you made it to the end. If you want to continue to freshen up your day, you can watch us on Fresh Living every weekday on CBS Channel 2 in Utah at 1 o'clock. You can also watch us on our YouTube channel, KUTV Fresh Living, and follow us on social media. We will see you next week.